Hi everyone and welcome to today's webinar. My name's Naomi Ann Little and I work in the marketing department of Wisdom Lifetiles. I'm joined today with Nico de Jong, one of the European-based innovation and experience leads for Wisdom and Lifetiles. Welcome,
Hi there,
Nico.
Naomi. Hi
Hi,
there.
thanks for joining today. The
Sure.
reason we're conducting this webinar today is that there's a lot of talk around governance in MS Teams and how it all works. So we've pulled together 3 mistakes to avoid when deploying MS Teams that we've found with customers in the market where they have problems, and also give you some tips on what you can do with Wisdom and Live Tiles to optimize the platform. Let's take a quick look at the agenda before we get into the finer details of MS Teams deployment. First, we'll have a quick rundown on the 3 mistakes to avoid when deploying MS Teams and what we can do to help. Following that, Nico will show how you can set up MS Teams and some of the problems we help solve with our solution. And finally, we'll end with a Q&A session. And if you have any questions during the webinar, ask them in the question chat on the right-hand side. There's a little orange button with an arrow. If you click on that, you'll find the questions section. Yep, and we'll answer them at the end of Nico's demonstration. The recording will be sent out to all attendees tomorrow. Let's get started, Nico.
Yeah, great stuff. Let's go. So I guess it's not news for anybody. Teams is big, and everybody's getting Teams now. At least all of our customers are talking about it and have either rolled it out, are rolling it out, having the first experiences, and finding that it's actually really easy to turn on. It's already included in most of their licensing, and users are really enthusiastic about it. But that's also often where some of the headaches start moving in. But let's see some of the figures there. It was announced today that there's more than 20 million daily users on Teams. That's great news. And I think we can conclude that chat-based collaboration is here to stay. It will not go away again. And a very interesting aspect of this is that Teams, beyond just being a chat and video conferencing and meeting and files brought in from SharePoint, some people in Microsoft, some executives are actually calling it the new operating system. So for a decade or more, we've tried to put the browser in front of everybody as a first place to start, and that didn't really succeed. But technology, especially web technology, is moving so fast that inside this window, a window like Teams, you could actually create a whole ecosystem, a whole operating system, and people could start living out of Teams as they do maybe today out of Outlook or maybe on your intranet. So it's not only Microsoft, it's actually the whole partner ecosystem, which is really excited about Teams. And Carrera Schuster, who's responsible for the ecosystem, calls this the biggest opportunity for partners right now there for Teams. And we've really took up that challenge and created a great solution. So that's all fantastic, but to be wise, you'd actually need to consider a couple of mistakes and avoid them. Most of these mistakes are not really new. You know, you introduce a new piece of technology, people are enthusiastic, people want to find out, people create teams for themselves, and we have a lot of customers where the teams are already running into the thousands, and a good percentage of those, maybe 20% of those, are just people trying out teams and sitting in a team themselves or with somebody else and just checking it out, something you wouldn't really want. So before you turn on those teams, you know, provide people with some guidelines. So what does that look like? By default, all users can create a team. So if you haven't locked it down, every user out there can create a team. But you know, what happens if you don't govern that? Well, we can see that out with a lot of customers already. 1 team is good, 5 teams is great, 20 teams becomes a bit complicated, and all of a sudden people start saying, well, actually, I don't know in which team we have which file and in which chat somebody said something, and they also have emails on the side. Or should I get teams at all? Should I not be taking a Yammer group to discuss this? So people need guidelines and people need a bit of governance around this solution. And as I said, you know, there's a lot of alternatives, and Yammer groups is just, or communities as they're called now, just one thing. But maybe you have some Slack teams out there. Maybe people work in distribution lists. Maybe people have a SharePoint team site set up. So, you know, when to use what, and what do you tell your users what to use when? So let's have a quick look behind the scenes, what actually goes on when you create those teams. When an MS team is created, a SharePoint site collection is created in the background, but also an Outlook distribution list is created, an Outlook group calendar, but also a plan in Planner, and of course the MS team itself in the MS Teams tenant. So it looks very innocent, the click of the button, but it creates a whole lot of stuff throughout the organization. Now, places that can leave traces behind, things that need to be managed in the long term, and just think of migration that you might have to do as soon as this technology changes, or if you want to change to some other technology altogether. So is it only a threat? No, that brings us to mistake 2, to create it or to actually look at it as a threat. So you could go out and create very strict rules around this. And some companies are doing that, just that, maybe not even turning it on for their users. But if you do turn it on, can you allow it and restrict it successfully? Does Microsoft actually give you the tools to do that? To our opinion, not really. Because as soon as you restrict it, you'll have to go through some sort of workflow where people will receive and evaluate requests for new teams. And against what will they evaluate that? And once you step through that evaluation process and you say, okay, I'll give somebody a team, then somebody needs to go out and create that team that by default makes you the owner. Well, actually you want to delegate that kind of thing to users. And then you have to communicate that again. So as soon as you start restricting that, there's actually a host of other problems that you run into. So in practice, most organizations would like to restrict that, but Microsoft doesn't really offer you the tools to do that. So when a Microsoft team is restricted, you get things like shadow IT. And again, nothing new. Microsoft Teams is not a whole new application in that sense. As soon as you start restricting it, people start finding other ways to share content. You have less control, you have lower compliance, same old stuff. And if you do restrict it, you have these manual tasks to go through and approve and create. And I think all around, it just creates a lot of frustration for the users and for the admins. So this is also not a way to go with Microsoft Teams. Then to our third mistake. As I already said, Teams is actually nothing really unique. It's just another tool that we're trying to improve our productivity with, trying to connect people around. And Teams is very self-service. So that's great. Just one click, you can turn it on, you can add people. It's quite intuitive, but self-service is not self-maintenance. So if we look at some of the self-service things and start asking some questions around that with Teams, again, who governs external access in these teams? How do you arrange that? Many of our customers decide then to completely close it off until they cannot handle the tickets any longer, why external people cannot be added, because that's actually extremely useful in Teams. So then something like, how do you enforce naming conventions? That can be pretty useful to increase the discoverability and consistency of the teams, but how do you actually do that? And then when will you archive teams, and how will you do that? Sure, Microsoft offers you the option to archive teams, but when will you know when to do that? For now, it doesn't really seem a problem because Teams is just growing, but this will be a problem in the future, just as it has been with other technology in the past. Then how do you discover Teams as a user? You can go into Teams and you can find a whole list, but what teams are used for what? How do you find the right team? How can you effectively search? How do you know who's part of those teams or what they're used for? That's something that Microsoft hasn't really figured out until now. And finally, the new silo. That's something that it's great that Microsoft Teams is growing, but as soon as people move from Outlook into Teams or from the internet into Teams, it just creates another silo where you have the files contained and the chat contained. And this is also something that in the beginning it seems great, but in the long run, you need something that connects all of the dots and where you can actually move out of Teams, or something that brings things into Teams. Well, we believe it's time to wise up your collaboration with the Wisdom for Teams solution. And the Wisdom for Teams solution, of course, addresses many of these issues that I've mentioned. But let's have a quick look at what you get out of the box. So out of the box, administration is a bit limited and to a certain extent a bit cumbersome. So you can go in and around provisioning, you can create a separate security group and make people part of that security group, and those people can then create teams within your organization. That's a way to govern it in part. But would you create one extra security group or many, or leverage the ones out there? That's just a question. Then as soon as you have those things set up and you have Office 365 groups set up and you want to do something in splitting guest access and allowing external people to join, and maybe setting up meeting policies or any different type of scenario that you would actually like to support with Teams, you need to get into classifications, something which is not really apparent directly. If you then look at the lifecycle management of Teams, as I said, Teams are growing at an enormous rate, but actually the only way you can sort of manage that is go into the admin panel and then manually check for underused groups, manually check for teams without owners, so that are orphan teams. And if you want to do anything with expiration, you can, but then you just need to set like a random number of expiration days on a particular group. And you need to do that as an admin. So again, you can have a look at this as an admin, but this is something you would actually want to delegate to your users, because they are taking part in these teams and they know best actually, what kind of data to store on the team, how long to use it. And it should actually be in their hands and not in your hands as an admin to just sort of randomly check whenever. So what this means up until now, at least up until we introduce our solution, is that people are shifting between interfaces. They'd like to have it in Teams, but they have to go to the admin panel. They have to think to go to the admin panel. And the admin panel is good for admins, but end users cannot access that. So they cannot see any of all of those teams and the lifecycle phase that they're in. So people need to establish different routines, often manually, keeping an eye on team ownership and where external sharing is on and off and the compliance with that. And Teams does have a number of settings, but not everything's up in the interface. So actually you need to, as an admin, go out, take your PowerShell, if you're comfortable with that, and do some of the settings through PowerShell. All of this is not really ideal. So we created a simple way to do advanced and automated governance right inside Teams, because that's where it belongs, and it doesn't even require AD Premium. So what we thought, as being very experienced in rolling out many intranets, you have to get governance right from the start. So with our solution, users actually get a menu to choose from, a menu that can be driven by templates and where the appropriate security can be applied and governance is tracked through a central list. This process of deploying these teams follows your naming conventions, and we actually can open that up to the full breadth of Microsoft Automate, formerly Flow, to automate any part of the process. So we can take PnP templates, we can take lists, we can get documents, and really scope this workspace to the specific need of your business. At the same time, we can lock down all the other entrances to creating a workspace, either being a team or a SharePoint site or maybe a Yammer group. Everything can go through one and the same menu, and this menu is actually sitting inside Microsoft Teams. We guide your users. So if you select one of those teams, you actually go through a list of metadata. And some of this metadata is set up by default, but others you can determine. And it's again based on the scenario that you need to support. So it follows your business needs and is really fixed to specific collaboration purposes, so that a team is not just a team, but it's guided towards a certain purpose, which of course in the end is the overall goal. You go in, you collect some data, or you fill in some data, and in return, this data ensures findability throughout the environment and ensures governance. We also added a layer of either manual or automatic approval, so that if you do want to put teams under approval of somebody other than the admin, for instance, you can nominate anybody in the organization to go through and approve these creations of teams, so that you reduce the sprawl. Ultimately, with the metadata, you can eliminate the number of orphans as well. And as teams go through different stages, and as team owners can update the metadata on the teams, you can actually get notified of changes. So there, where the teams are sort of out of sight, out of mind, you will get notifications through email alerting you that a certain team is maybe archived or has changed the status. So what do you get for this? Well, first of all, happy users. It's easy to find and discover and filter on the teams in the organization, even if there are many of them. It's easy to view and update the metadata to see what a team is really about. You can get some instant access to all the teams that you're a member of. So that is a special filter, a web part that's presented inside our app. You can then follow and unfollow teams, so you have your favorites set up, and you can quickly see the teams that you need to review, because every team should always be under ownership and always on a schedule of reviewing to see if it either can be archived or needs to change status or anything else. Well, besides happy users, you get also blissful admins. Admins get their own dashboard of teams right inside Teams, and they can look across all of the teams, follow all of the team's progress, look into metadata to make certain decisions, look up the owners of teams to maybe contact them to ask about status, and they get a very practical overview of the teams that need review. On top of that, as we are the engine of governance behind it, we collect all of the changes, all of the teams that are being either provisioned or archived, and we can provide some great insights. And I have some examples of that in Power BI, but actually you can create any number of reports that help you see how the engagement is in teams, how the uptake is, but for instance also which types of collaboration based on those templates are most popular within the organization. So let's go into the demo. I'll just give this a very quick reload. As you can see, this is an application that sits right into Teams. And you can either soon add it as an app on the side, following the Ignite announcements that we're able to pin those applications on the side, or you can also add it as a tab to a team, even also in provisioning the team itself. So we have this landing page, which is customizable, and you can see any number of actions that you can put up for your users in the organization. And I'll quickly run through the menu. This menu up here provided by the Power Panel can be actually anything you'd like it to be. So this is just a sample of what you could do. And within your organization, you can actually have multiple configurations of this. So if we walk through all of the options here, we see that we have some workspaces. I'll get back to that. We've put up the dashboard of workspaces there, but we can also roll up some news, maybe coming from your internet or from other sources, into a news feed, so that this sort of tackles not having to have the need to switch between windows and switch between the intranet or another space, and just roll them up here. Same for other notifications, things like approvals can roll up in here, tasks that you can present in this way, and also get some links in so that people are not contained only in the silo, but can navigate back and forth between different locations. We will look at these in detail in the next webinar, so be sure to sign up for that. But for now, we'll just look at the workspaces. So here as a user, I get a list of my workspaces, and I can go in and look at any of the metadata of these workspaces. Let me point at it correctly. My mouse is jumping a bit. So you can see any of the details. You can also go in and edit of those details. So you can go in and edit metadata very quickly and maybe change some of this from private to public, or maybe archive or change the review date. So it's really easy to go in and to make those changes. To find the right team, you can actually go in and filter and use any of the metadata out there. So for instance, we could take keywords, fill that in, quickly filter. But you could also use the search up here. And if you only would know one word, for instance, Astanga, you can get the result just like that. But if we go in and we actually need a new team, we can get that in the same place. Through clicking add, you actually get this menu of options out there. And this you can configure to your needs completely. I can go in, request a new project, fill in the title for the project, description, area, and this mapping again can be what you need. Add some keywords to that, either existing or new ones. Decide if it's public or private right from here, if it's open for external sharing or not, and then fill in the important end dates or review dates that you might need. So I can just go back and not issue this at the moment. We can have a look here again. As you can see, it's super easy to create those teams, to filter those teams, to find those teams, but you can also favorite those teams. And we have additional web parts that can actually show you these things down here. But also similar, you can have web parts that show you the ones that you need to review. So you can go in and see what might need to be changed to that particular workspace, or if it can be archived or not. If we move on to the dashboard for the admins, This is actually something that can be done not only by one person in your organization, but by multiple people. And again, we find the same simple interface of filtering and searching, but then across all of the teams. So you get all of the teams here in list, and you get some prime metadata on it, such as activity or date that you can filter on, find. But you can also move down and have a look at all of the inactive workspaces and decide, for instance, to archive those or change something. As soon as the workspace transitions to a next phase, for instance, review day being passed, or the owners would get a notification. So you don't really have to go out there and act and do anything as an admin. But if it sits there and nobody acts, you could go in and see who the owner is and actually notify them again, or contact them separately to discuss what needs to be done with this workspace. Down here, we see some of the workspaces for review, and at the bottom, you get some insights, but this is better shown maybe inside the Power BI reports. So I have one open here as well. In this demo environment, we have very little actual data, so this is a bit rudimentary, but this just gives an example of some of the things that you could do and maybe roll up in a report. And as soon as you have those things up in a report, you can actually sit them down here, because this is just a page that you can change, and you can add and embed and take web parts and embed Power BI right into this interface. So with that, I'd like to conclude the demo, and I'd like to give it back to you, Naomi, and thank everybody for attending. And I'm very curious if there's any questions about this solution.
Great, thanks, Nico. I do have a couple of questions here. One from Georgina Baker. Is it possible to blacklist team names to avoid duplication?
Yeah, so you can follow schemas for naming conventions that would check and reduce the risk of double teams. There's still a way around that, because the title is just a title. And through the analytics, you can actually report on and search for double team names and act on that. So we cannot completely exclude it, but it's very easy to guide users, and then if need be, to also deduplicate after creation.
Yeah, thanks, Nico. I hope that answers your question, Georgina. We have another question. How is it deployed?
Yeah, the deployment is very easy. We set it up through the managed service of Wisdom. You get an application for your Office 65 environment that you need to install, and then you are good to go to configure the application. The application consists of a power panel, which needs to be configured, and the menu that I have shown you, that you need to decide what kind of teams you'd like to support. Our experience up until now is that we should be able to actually do that in 2 half days, and that is actually part of our value assurance package that you can read at the bottom of this slide. So we're actually able to configure this very quickly, and it just relies on deploying an application inside your Office 65 tenant.
Great, thanks, Nico. So we have another webinar planned for the 11th of December on how to bring your intranet into MS Teams. So be sure to sign up to that. The link's provided on this last slide. If you have further questions or would like a product demonstration along the lines of what Nico has shown you today, please reach out to me. I'm the contact person in regards to the Wisdom for MS Teams. My email can be found on the screen there in front of you. Thank you, Nico, and thank you all for joining today.
You're welcome.
Thanks
for joining. Yep. Have a nice day.